Hi, Misha. I wanted to do a quick rundown of a helicopter, but not this one here. This is the French Puma, made by Eurocopter. But I actually wanted to talk about this one here. A little more famous plane today, aircraft I should say. This is the French-German Eurocopter Tiger, also known as the EC-665. This is a dedicated attack helicopter, multi-role attack helicopter, analogous to like an Apache. The reason I had the Puma, I'm not sure when I publish this video if I'll have this one up first or this other video, but I was doing a video kind of looking at Corgi British helicopters, and this is a British Puma used in North Ireland during the Troubles in the 90s, and Britain had purchased quite a few Pumas from France, and they were assembled by Westland in the UK, and yeah, this was a very successful aircraft for Eurocopter. They would produce these from 1965 to 1987. It would be replaced by its, own successor, the Super Puma. And eventually Eurocopter would join up and become part of Eurocopter, which would lead to this bird here. Just to say, this, like I said, was a Corgi 172 scale diecast of the Puma. The Eurocopter here is actually a 172 scale diecast as well, but it is from Air Force One. And it's actually one I put off getting for quite a while. And it usually happens when I put off getting something. When I get it, I'm actually super happy with it. And that is no different this time. I will explain why in a bit. Again, this is just kind of a first look, very informal video, so excuse the rough edges. It's also really hard for me to film Air Force Ones because of their stands. They're very tall. They're good stands. They're metal. And they're held together with screws. I would actually say Air Force One has the best stands. Corgis aren't bad. Hobby Masters are very hit or miss, but I love how the Air Force One stands are done. But I digress. The story of the Eurocopter Tiger dates back to the early 1980s, when the Cold War was still very warm, if not outright hot, and there was still worry of the invasion of Western Europe via the Fulda Gap located in West Germany. And of course, tank power was considered one of the Soviet Union's specialties, the T-72 for example. And the West Germans knew that they would be on the front line of the war, as did France, and they also knew that their allies, Britain and America, would have to transport armor and things over an ocean. Long story short, they felt they had a need for a then modern attack helicopter, specializing in anti-armor. So in 1984, the French and German, West German I should say, governments put out specifications for a new helicopter, and this quickly became a joint project. France was kind of angling for an escort helicopter, a close air support, and Germany wanted more of a anti-tank. And in the beginning it didn't go well. By 1986 the project was effectively shelved, not outright canceled, but it was essentially suspended for lack of additional funding. But then in late 1987, it was restarted and kind of refocused, and more emphasis was placed on a strictly speaking attack anti-tank helicopter, dropping some of the multi-role features that were starting to creep into the design. Well, in 1989, agreements were signed to produce 5 prototypes and to set up assembly lines in both France and Germany. While this would be a joint project, of course, each nation would be assembling its own Eurocopters. But then, of course, that was right after the Berlin Wall had fallen, and so there was quite a bit of speculation if this was going to even be a required or necessary or useful aircraft to be in the air forces and armies of the time. Nevertheless, the first prototype flew in April of 1991. And then there was a lot of talk if Germany would just pull out, which would leave France alone and probably end the project, as it were. But instead, in 1992, Germany more or less reaffirmed its commitment, and the Eurocopter company itself was formed as such, taking elements from the old Aerospatiale. And then in 1996, the French and German governments would sign new, fresh agreements outlining updated specifications for the aircraft, post-Cold War and with all the new technologies. And then in 1999, each country would order 80 of the new aircraft, with the first production model being rolled out of the factory in a very public ceremony in 2002. The first production Eurocopters were submitted for military trials as early as 2003, but really it wasn't until 2005, first France, and then about half a year later Germany would receive their first production aircraft and really start putting them through their paces. And by 2008, 25 years after this whole thing started, they were declared operational and ready to go. So what makes this different from, say, an Apache? Well, for one thing, it is an all-composite fuselage and hull. It's made of carbon fiber reinforced polymer with Kevlar where needed. It was designed from the outset to be stealthy, also highly maneuverable. It was designed from the beginning to have a glass cockpit, so a modern cockpit. It has a crew of 2, a pilot in the front and a weapons officer in the back, so kind of reverse from the old Cobra days. Although each one can do the roles of the others, controls can be shifted if needed. This big ball on the top is part of the Osiris system, which was a sighting and sensor complex. It has a laser designator as well as television cameras and other advanced sensors. So it's a little goofy looking perhaps, but also very practical. We have hard points on each of the stubby wings that can carry combinations of unguided rockets, guided missiles, or even additional cannon. It has a 30mm cannon on the nose as standard, with 400 to 450 rounds of ammunition. Lengthwise, we're at about 46 feet long, about 43 foot rotor diameter. It's quite a fast helicopter, but that wasn't its primary thing. Maneuverability, agility was more important than outright speed. But nevertheless, it can get up to about 180 miles per hour with the Osiris bobble on top. I believe they actually call it a mast, but I prefer to call it a bobble. Looks like a bobble. And without it, it can get up to nearly 200 miles per hour. And it has a ceiling of about 13,000 feet and some change. It was designed to be autonomous and survivable, able to fly through chemical, biological warfare, even nuclear warfare if it ever were to happen. Hopefully not. And France would send its first Eurocopter Tigers into a combat zone in the summer of 2009 in Afghanistan. It would later deploy them to Libya and Mali. Unfortunately, Germany's experience was not as positive. In fact, 2010, they suspended payments and deliveries because of claims of faulty wiring, which forced the manufacturer to basically go back and do upgrades. And by 2012, these upgraded Tigers were starting to fly for Germany, and 4 were deployed to Afghanistan as well. And then in 2013, another user, Spain, who was a junior partner in all of this, would start to deploy its own Tigers to Afghanistan. And Australia makes up the other major user of the Tiger. By the end of 2009, about 50 were in service, and today, about 140 are in service. But with production ongoing, that number is likely to rise. It is a capable attack helicopter, just with an extremely protracted development period and extremely expensive. It would have been cheaper for everyone involved to just buy Apaches or update older designs, but that's how politics often go. But even though it took a quarter century, they did come up with a capable helicopter in the end. It is multi-role capable. Yes, it is an anti-armor, but it can also provide close air support. It can do reconnaissance, surveillance. It could operate from land or from ships. That was a major requirement that France had. They're one of the few nations still operating aircraft carriers on a regular basis. And so yeah, there you have kind of my first little rundown of the Eurocopter Tiger. Now, as to this Air Force One model, it has your typical Air Force One features. Of course, the rotor blades do turn. You have removable ordnance. You have their typical, not awesome, but still there, pilot figures in the cockpit. What's neat about it, this is a diecast model. It has nice weight to it, but since the original plane, the original aircraft is composite, the texture they put on this is quite interesting, and I like it. It does have kind of a polymer overlay of a die-cast body, so it has the weight and rigidity of a die-cast, but it feels like a carbon fiber composite should feel. So I think they did an excellent job kind of mocking up that. You never know about Air Force One. Sometimes they really knock it out of the park. Other times they might leave a little bit to be desired, but I think on this one it's a good hit, and they are cheaper than Hobby Master, and they are cheaper than some Corgi. So there is that. But yeah, just been trying to give the helicopters a little love, since you don't see many diecast helicopter reviews at all online, and the models themselves aren't selling great, so I think they're neat. I'd love to see Corgi or Hobby Master or Air Force One do more. I'd love to see a Mill MI-24 Hind or an AH-1 Cobra or Super Cobra. Corgi at least does give us quite a few of the Westland air helicopters, like the Whirlwind, the Wessex, and the Lynx. So that's good at least. But there's not really anyone doing American choppers except for the Apache and the Chinook. For some reason, quite a few people will do the Chinook. Anyway, guys, if you have any questions or comments, please do post them below. And if you could, like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon. Next time.